Welcome to CYF Spotlight, presented by the Commission on Children, Youth, and Families. The Commission is a joint effort between the City of Farmington Hills and the City of Farmington. Its purpose is to foster a healthier community by focusing on our most precious resources, our children and our families. The Commission is made up of dedicated volunteers and community activists from all walks of life. Working together with other groups and agencies in the community, the Commission creates programs with one goal: to encourage a supportive environment where children, youth, and families are happy, healthy, educated, and safe, and have the opportunity to reach their full potential. The Commission is hosting this show to bring our focus and activities to the community. We welcome your input and support. You can learn more about our Commission at our website, www.cyf.us.
Hello, welcome to the CYF Spotlight. Today our focus is on literacy. My name is Laura Scott, head of the Children's Department at the Farmington Community Library's 12-mile location, the main library. I'm pleased today to interview Dr. Tisa Johnson-Hooper, who is a pediatrician at the Henry Ford Hospital Clinic. Dr. Johnson-Hooper, I know that you and your family have been avid readers and library users, and that you have implemented reading programs in your pediatric practice. Would you please talk about why reading aloud is so important?
Well, I'll tell you, I've always been a reader. I've read since I was a young child and have always enjoyed it. And it wasn't until really I became a pediatrician that I recognized the benefit of reading aloud to even the various young. I think first and foremost, it promotes bonding. You know, I think every parent wants to bond with their newborn, and to read to a newborn, to snuggle in close and to nurture, that just facilitates that lifelong of bonding. I think in a bigger picture, I value reading because it really is a very strong link to positive outcomes in life. So when I think about reading to the young, I think about those children that are read to, often, frequently have a literacy-rich environment. Those are kids that develop language, speech, and vocabulary at a much earlier age, stronger than their peers who don't come from that type of environment. These are kids that read earlier and are better readers. And so what we do know, those children that are stronger readers are academic achievers. Those are those children that go on to higher education. And what we all know is education can unlock, all the barriers. It lifts people out of poverty. And as a health professional, as a pediatrician, I'm keenly aware of the disparities between those folks that are a lower socioeconomic status versus those who are not in a lower socioeconomic status. So, long-winded way of saying reading definitely promotes better health outcomes for people.
You know, I know that people say it's really important to read to babies, but it can be really tricky to do. A baby is not going to give you any kind of feedback. They're not going to look into your eyes or smile when you say a certain phrase. Their eyes don't even necessarily focus on a page. Can you give some tips to make that a successful?
Yeah. I always get that same look from parents when they're there for their newborn visit, and I ask, so what are you reading to your baby? They look at me like, are you kidding me? And the thing is, they do give us feedback. We don't know what to look for. The newest of babies, the moment they're born, they have a preference for their mother's voice. I mean, they've heard it for 9 months, right? So when you read to a newborn, if you're keenly aware of what they're doing, their respiration evens out, their heart rate gets down, they get calm, and they turn towards that voice. Again, that's bonding right there in its simplest form. So that's really what I try to model to the parent, showing how that child's going to preference, those familiar voices over a strange voice. And that's what you want to hear. That's the beginning of bonding and modeling. So, even the youngest babies that aren't looking at you lovingly and responding to what you're saying the way we would recognize a smile, wide eyes, they do give us feedback and they are responding.
And they're, even at that young age, still absorbing some of the vocabulary. And
They are. It's the cadence, it's the rhythm, it's the sound. They're absorbing all that, and just those early sounds, becoming familiar with it. Because if you think of baby and their language development, at the very young age, 2 to 4 months, they're babbling. At first they're cooing the vowel sounds, and they're babbling. Then it goes to jargoning, which is that blah, 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 blah. And where do they get that from? They get that from the parent. And so that's what reading can promote.
And these are happy sounds that we're sharing with them.
Yeah.
Sounds from a book, sounds they might not hear in everyday life to enrich their vocabulary.
Exactly. You'll hear words you may not typically use, like in the twinkle, twinkle, little star. Most people are not going to use twinkle in every single day vocabulary, but that's a way to enrich vocabulary, and kids will start incorporating that.
Okay. Well, then as children move on, they become mobile. They have the opportunity to walk and aggressively explore their world. And I hear so many parents of toddlers say, oh my gosh, he or she just won't sit still for a story. How can we support literacy at that point?
Right. And I'll have to confess, that was my little bit of trepidation for my middle child, who was a very busy boy. But I learned quickly, he was always listening. Regardless, he wasn't the one to sit next to you, lovingly look in your eye and share a book the way you would think you'd want to share a book. He was over playing with the blocks, moving from toy to toy, engaged in his activity, but always listening. So I remained steadfast to my need to read aloud. I'd sit in the middle of the floor, open up a book and read it. And so reading to toddlers is that repetition. And I would test whether he's listening as I'd skip a page. Immediately when I skip a page, he'd look up and he would be able to tell me what I had missed. So he was listening. Or to make sure he was engaged, I would read something and I'd say, oh, look at that bear, my goodness. And he'd race over and look at the bear and point with his little finger and off he'd go again. So he was listening. And I think we need to move past what we think is reading to a toddler with that not a very typical, calm 2-year-old sitting there for 20, 30 minutes soaking in a book, but it may be 5 minutes of the kid moving about, but you're still reading and you're asking questions and you're saying, look, and you'll realize they are listening and they're attending. And those are skills you need in school.
Yes. Well, as children get older, they often request that you read a book to them again and again and again, and sometimes this is very frustrating for parents. Why is it so important for a child to hear a book repeated? And do you have any strategies on?
Yeah, I do. Kids like what's familiar. They like routine. They like to know what is going to happen. That's settling. That really is. And so it's okay if you're like, gosh, well, I've read this now 100 times. Well, what you can do to make it thrilling and make it fun, you can do a lot of, they know what's going to happen next. You could say, well, what would you do differently? Or let's change the ending. Kind of pull them into the story in a different way than you just reading and they're passively listening. Get them to be engaged. If they've heard it over and over, they likely know what's coming next. And if they're yet not a reader, have them point out with their finger. They're following along. Now they connect the spoken word to the written word. So you can make that familiar book an aid to expand on what you want from your child.
A lot of children, as they become preschoolers, 3, 4, 5-year-olds, they're really curious about the world, and they're very interested in nonfiction. Mm-hmm. Is this important to share with them as well as stories?
I think it is, depending on your child's age and developmental level. Clearly, there's a lot going on in the world that's not appropriate for kids to know about. It would be unsettling for them. So I think it's to the discretion of the parent to filter out and make it age appropriate, and use that for a conversation, or use it even for a child to write their own story about what they've heard about in the news. And then that can be a story you read to the child over and over again.
Is it useful for parents to continue to read to children who are beginning to read independently?
I think it's vital. I truly do. If their child's beginning to read independently, or as an older child, 10, or even a high schooler, I still advocate for reading aloud. There's so much you can get out of it. Again, back to that bonding. Even if you have a 15-year-old, you bond when you're sitting close and you're sharing that book together. But for those emerging readers or those early readers, I think it's wonderful because it really reinforces their confidence. I read, now you read, and you applaud their efforts, and you can choral read together to help them with the cadence and the flow of reading. It definitely aids. It's not going to cripple them, but I think it's going to build that confidence that you're reading together still.
There are a lot of people that are raising children for whom English is not their first language, and they can sometimes feel that it's not useful for their children to hear words spoken with an accent. Can you tell us about why this is important to just continue to read?
I certainly think it's important to read regardless of what language you read in. Parents will often say, well, I don't want to speak in my native tongue because that's going to impair their ability to learn English. The truth is, children that come from bilingual homes that are exposed to two languages, early on, you may see a delay in their vocabulary in each individual language, but these kids not only catch up, they surpass children in single language homes in both languages. So it is to their benefit to maintain the family's native tongue as well as English and speaking on it every day. It's not going to hurt them. It's going to, in the long term, enrich them.
We recently had a program featuring a woman whose father taught her to read, yet he could not read himself. Can you talk about ways that parents can support their child's literacy?
So that's an issue that I oftentimes deal with in my practice, where parents are reluctant to read to their kids because they're insecure about their own literacy skills. So one of the things that I talk about with reading, it doesn't have to start off with reading the word on the page. You could start with looking at pictures and telling a story. Telling a story about what you see. What do you think happens next? How do you think you feel? And you're looking at page and you're giving those words. Along the same line, if parents are motivated to improve their literacy skill, often then reading books that are for emerging readers is what they're learning along the way, along with their child. And many children don't even realize that the parent has literacy issues because they're learning along the way, but they're using books, not just picking up a higher level reader and reading it, but starting at a low level and building together. They're modeling the behavior. They're demonstrating the importance of reading and looking at pictures and discussing in conversation. So it's really helpful.
Now, families are so busy these days. We, at the library, we encourage everybody to read at least 15 minutes a day, and for some, this seems to be a struggle. What tips do you have for finding that time?
It is something that I struggle with daily. I have 3 overly scheduled kids at just different ages, so it makes it really hard for us to sit as a family and read a book because it's just not going to capture everyone's attention. Early on, what I did as I work every day with busy kids, I would use just any opportunity to incorporate reading. So we have a lot of driving to and from school, so I loved books on tape. We did a lot of books on tape in the car, and I would check out, for my older 2, check out the 2 books, so they were in the back, following along. The audio was overhead. I could listen what was happening. I did a lot of stopping. Oh, that was so cool. What do you think? It was just the conversation around the book, and they were following it. During bath time, I would do it. I was sneaking in audio books wherever I could find it because you're just so busy. It is hard, so I think it just takes a little creativity, and you only need minutes. When you say 15, 20 minutes of reading, it may not be able that you can do 20 minutes all at one time, but maybe 10 minutes on the way to school with an audiobook. Or if you have kids similar age, share the book. Okay, if you read on the way, you read on the way home. But think of what your day looks like and how you can sneak in the reading, and not set the expectation that it's going to be a quiet 20 minutes consecutively and everybody's going to be sitting around, because maybe someone is doing their homework over here and they're also listening to mom reading to this child over there. Maybe now it's the older kid that has a turn. You got to look at your family dynamic, but set the expectation that we're going to read.
As an avid reader and a librarian, I have been taught that reading is the best thing you can do to foster literacy. However, in the past few years, our library has been affiliated with the Family Place Library Network, which has taught us that play is really the foundation of literacy. And this has opened up a whole new realm of service for us, as well as opened up our thought processes. Can you talk about the value of play?
Yeah, it is surprising that you would think play is just natural, right? But I don't know where adults lose that ability to play, but sometimes I find myself having to instruct families on really how to play. And I think the first advice I give them is just keep it simple. I think we try to complicate it. Keep it very simple. Get on the child's level. So that means get on the floor, remove clutter, distraction, turn off the TV, the iPad, all that distractions, put the phone away, get on the floor and just play. You can do tickle time. I have my list of basic toys I think everybody needs. Everybody needs bubbles. That's fundamental. You need bubbles. You can count, with the bubbles. You can do a lot of anticipation. There's a lot of joint sharing with bubbles. Everyone needs blocks. I think those are just basic things. A ball is wonderful. For the little older kids, maybe some Play-Doh. I just think those basic toys really are those fundamentals to learning literacy, math, adaptive skills. So I would encourage, play. There's many books that you can turn into an activity. You're reading it, it's telling you, jump up and down, touch your head. It's play. So I agree with that.
Oh, that's great. And then parents are also having conversations with their child through play, having another opportunity to name things, to talk about process, to give them other words to use in their lives.
Yeah, just the everyday activity that you do, you can turn that into an educational opportunity. And it doesn't have to be huge. I know when you're a busy working parent, you get home, you just want to do dinner. Well, maybe you can, take that young kiddo and say, all right, I want you to stir the batter. We're going to stir it for the count of 5, or you're looking at a children's cookbook. What comes next? You can turn it into something that they're getting things out of it, as opposed to, okay, I got to quickly get this dinner together, and but incorporate kids in what you're doing, because they're going to learn.
Another literacy tool that has received prominence lately is singing with young children. Do you have some suggestions for this?
Yeah, I advocate music for children probably as much as I advocate reading. I love music, and I oftentimes incorporate the two, quite honestly. I often have music playing in the background and reading. I think that's just a wonderful combination. But singing is perfect because, again, it's that cadence, the rhythm, often rhyme, you're exposed to vocabulary, it's repetition, you get kids moving because they're constantly moving. So it is a wonderful way to harness their energy, focus them on vocabulary and rhythm and beats, and certainly is a foundation, again, with learning.
There have been many news features lately talking about the hazards of screen time for young children and perhaps everyone.
Yeah.
The Commission on Children, Youth, and Family annually supports a screen-free week. Can you talk about how you advise parents on this matter?
Yeah, when I recommend screen-free periods, I get blank stares. Parents are like, what are we going to do with those kids? It's comical, but what I try to do is not just say, okay, a screen-free, what can you do in place of? So I think you got to give some tools and demonstrate how these substitutes could be incredibly beneficial and what you do see is that families will incorporate those in the day-to-day and maybe gradually decrease the screen time. So at every well child visit, I make sure I'm not talking just about reading, but let's talk about screen. And so that's the phone, that's the TV, the computer, all those eye things, that's all screen. And so the American Academy of Pediatrics recommended back in 2013 for children less than the age of 2, they don't need screen time at all. Children 2 and above, that even includes those adolescents, they really only need 2 hours of TV. I don't want to say need, but that they should not have more than 2 hours of TV a day. Because when you're watching TV, a lot of parents will say, well, I only let them watch the educational shows. So I guess if you're going to look at your options, an educational show is better than one that is not educational. But I oftentimes tell parents, kids learn by interaction. right? And you take their cue, and a TV can't see that your kid's looking over here at the red flower, and then stop and go, oh, comment on the red flower, smell the red flower, let's have a conversation around the red flower, because they have a script and they're going, and so they're not meeting that child at their level and their needs. So although it's educational, it isn't ideal for every day.
Okay. With television and streaming media and all of those things, it's so easy to be surrounded by sound every day, all day. Do you have any further suggestions for recommendations for limits and how to manage that?
It's kind of interesting around what I notice. A lot of kids are always having their headphones on. Whether they're doing homework, they always have sound going. And many kids feel as if they study better, they read better with background noise. And I do see a lot of kids may have attentional issues, and it helps filter out. But I do think there is something for being still, for being silent, and a time for being quiet, so you can take in, a good book and read it and be contemplative. So when I advocate for that 20 minutes of reading, I do try to tell parents, make sure, you can set yourself up for success. Pick a time when it's not so crazy, that you can turn the TV and the music and all the, gadgets off, and you can just have a quiet background and read. You get more out of it than being distracted by everything else going on.
Do you have other tips for setting up that conducive reading environment?
Yeah, for me, like a literacy-rich environment for the very young is having books in every room. Just I tell parents, just get a basket or an empty bucket and put a variety of books down on the floor so the kids can explore it. And you're going to get some ripped pages. I mean, that's just what you're going to do. But depending on the child's age level, maybe a board book for those kids that are just developing that nice pincer grasp would be more appropriate. For the younger infant, the plastic ones, because they're going to put it in their mouth. But that's literacy for that 6-month-old. That's how they explore with their mouth. So what I really try to do is give anticipatory guidance of what literacy looks like at that age. Have those types of reading materials available at the child's level, so when they're in the bathroom with you, or they're in your room or their room or their living room or in the kitchen, there are books there. So that's one of the first things. I make sure families understand what a literacy-rich environment should look like. Secondly, I do talk about take away the distractions. I think well-meaning parents will buy like every gadget and toy out there, and they put it, in the child's play area, and the kids get so distracted and overwhelmed. They're just fleeting from one activity to the next, and their attention isn't there. So I encourage families to put away the toys and set out a select few, get on the floor with them, away from distraction, and engage with what the child, follow their lead. When they pick up the blocks, you can talk about it, name the letter about it. Then in a few moments, they'll move on and they'll pick up their book. And you're excited about it, and you're turning the pages, and you're talking about it. So it's kind of, I think back to a story I told a parent that just seemed overwhelmed with this. We actually got a piece of paper out and we wrote, at 10 o'clock, this is what you can do for 5 minutes. At 11 o'clock, this is what you can do for 5 minutes. Because the feedback was, I don't even know where to start, Yes. So it's keeping it simple.
And as you say, following the cues of the child and building on that.
Yeah.
Following their interests.
And
I bet you have books in your car too.
I do have books in my car. That's a very good point. I do. I have activity books, coloring books, all in the pocket. And I will tell you the biggest pet peeve, and I know families do it, when they have the cars with the video, that drives me crazy. It does. I'm like, they could just have a book that they're reading. I have a little one that's a new reader, and she just loves getting in the car and she's reading to me. It's hard. She's like, what's this word, Mommy? I'm like, spell it,
Yes.
But it's nice,
yes.
It's just maybe a 10-minute ride. Whereas forever, the kids get in, they pull the video down, and they're just glued on that screen.
Yes.
So
it's a missed opportunity for engagement.
Yeah, very missed opportunity.
I think when families have books that are accessible for kids, those books are not going to remain pristine, but they're going to be used and they're going to be loved. The public library offers the opportunity for families to select from a wide variety of books to take them home, and they might not want to leave them about as they would in other places, but it offers an opportunity for such a wealth of different titles. Can you talk about maybe how to structure a visit to the public library for success?
Yeah, I just think the library has so much to offer. I am struck every day when I talk to parents. I do every single day. I'll ask, does your kiddo have a library card? I'm like, well, no, I don't remember the last time we were there. And I just, honestly, I go into just all what the library has to offer. And depending on that age of the child and their interest, there may be programming on a daily basis or on the weekends, I don't know. But the first thing I tell parents is get on the website and look at the programming that's available. Another thing which I do personally is my family, we go to multiple libraries. My little one, she's like, I want to go to the library at the stage. I want to go to the library at the kitchen. She just knows them by their activities. And so we'll go to different libraries week over week because they just have different programs. So I always tell families, check the website and look what's going on in the local libraries because the options are just immense. Families don't know that. That's the first thing, And then secondly, even if there isn't a structured activity, there are, in the children's library, there's activity, for kids to go meet other kids, explore. There's floor time, things that they can touch and see and do. So go and just an hour of unstructured time and follow that kid's lead. Once they've had their free time to explore, as a parent, just grab a book. They're age level. And if they don't know, ask the librarian. I know I've asked you a lot of times, but for my son,
right.
What should he be reading? But ask the librarian. You guys are just wealth of knowledge. And then so I take that and I follow your advice, and that's the book I'll check out, and we'll do 5 minutes with this book, and then 5 minutes. Reading is that habit. So a library time should be something that you get in routinely. I would suggest at least once a week. Make a habit of just exploring the library.
Would you like to talk about some of the books that you've enjoyed reading with your children, or that you recommend to children today?
Oh my gosh. Well, I think for the very young, any of the Eric Carle books, my kids just loved. They just, that repetition, and they loved those. I'm sad I don't know the name of I Love You Forever. That one, my son is 14. I started reading that book to him when he was 2. Every day we read that book. I love that book. I just do. Let's see, How Do Dinosaurs Say Goodnight? That was a favorite one. I have a younger one now that we're reading Judy Blume's like Fudge and Super Fudge together. That's a little over her reading style, but we read that together and talk about that. My older two, this summer is when we do a lot of reading aloud. We'll pair up books. So my oldest, we're going to be reading Maya Angelou's I Know What Caged Bird Sings. My middle one, To Kill a Mockingbird. We're going to share that. But I think one of my favorite books of all time that I recommend to my patients, The Phantom Told Both. I love that book. I love it because it really speaks to different ages, genders, and it's fantasy. I love it. My kids loved it, and we read that. We've probably read that 3 or 4 times during the summer. It's really good. I'm going to pull it out for my younger one in a couple of years.
A classic. It introduces spatial reasoning and abstract and concrete, and
I love that book.
Do you have any other recommendations for parents, or any other comments that you'd like to make about fostering literacy with children?
I think we've touched on so much. I think to give parents resources besides checking out the library, talking to their librarian, that's just key. Getting to know the librarians, because you guys know so much, and you too. You've just been so helpful for me as a parent, let alone in my profession. You've supported my practice significantly for literacy. There is a website, Read Aloud America,
yes,
which I like because they're a list. Parents just want to know, what should I read? And it's nice, it breaks it down by age, wonderful titles for parents to pick from. So that's usually where I direct families when they're searching for a book for their kid.
Okay. Well, I would like to thank you so much for sharing your insights and your knowledge and experience with us.
I enjoy doing it. You're welcome.
Thank you. On behalf of the Commission for Children, Youth, and Families, thank you for watching this show on literacy. I'd like to invite you to visit the Farmington Community Library's branches on Liberty Street in downtown Farmington, and our main library on 12 Mile Road. Both locations offer rich resources in our children's departments, books, hands-on materials, coloring sheets, and a wide array of programming. We're happy to give you information about programs when you visit, or you can check out our website. We also offer a summer reading program every summer, 8 weeks of reading incentives, programs, and library staff who love to cheer children on to meeting their reading objectives. We hope that you'll join us. We look forward to seeing you often. Thank you so much.